All right, we're here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thanks so much for joining us on a Monday. Josh Doring, Chris Brown in the correct boxes on the screen, I might add. Gentlemen, how you doing on this Monday morning?
I'm pretty happy. We had a top level college basketball game that lived up to the hype. Like, there's so much hype behind it. It's hard to live up to it. We had a Super Bowl, didn't live up to all the hype. We had a big sporting event that lived up to the hype, and that is becoming, I feel like, pretty rare. So I'm here for it.
Well,
yeah.
What's becoming rare is those games actually happening, right?
I mean,
that too.
Michigan, Illinois, Gonzaga,
Right.
Baylor. I'm pretty sure Baylor and Baylor and Texas have played, haven't they? But
Yes.
Baylor and Texas was not what it was supposed to be by the time, right? When they were supposed to play the first time, Texas was just thought of a little bit differently than they are now. But you're exactly right. We had a game that we talked about literally all week. I mean, I can't remember the last time I previewed a college basketball game on a Thursday podcast when the game wasn't until Sunday. Couldn't tell you the last time we did, but we did that because the game was supposed to be one of the best of the year. We're talking about Michigan, Ohio State, of course, and that's exactly what it was. It was an instant classic. It was for a sport that I think has missed out on, right, not just... It was always going to be different because there were no fans, and even games that didn't end up being super exciting, the hype was going to be awesome, and watching it on TV was going to be awesome because of all the fans. Not only do we miss that, but we've also just missed out on, I feel like, a ton of really good college basketball games that were hyped up and talked about, and game day went and all of those things. But what we got on Sunday, when Michigan beat Ohio State 92-87 in Columbus, it lived up to everything it was supposed to be and more.
Yeah, it was exactly what you would have hoped it was. And on a very broad level, this game did exactly what I thought it would and what I hoped it would, which was to prove that these two teams are absolutely in the second tier of teams behind Gonzaga and Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them are very good. There isn't much separating them. I'm not interested in this discussion about Michigan being on the same level as Baylor and Gonzaga.
Nope.
Because they have now one win over a really, really good team. Now, Ohio State's better than really, really good, but the point being, I'm including a Texas Tech or a Texas in that category. They haven't gotten those games. Not Michigan's fault. They've got some more opportunities coming up here, but this is the first one they had, and they didn't do it as convincingly as Baylor and Gonzaga have at times. They were 11 of 23 from three. Now, Ohio State was 11 of 22, so the Buckeyes shot the ball a little bit better from three. My point just being, I didn't come away from this game thinking, Michigan is clearly the better team here. It doesn't matter who they play. They're going to handle everybody the way I feel about Gonzaga and Baylor. They won on the road in Columbus. Give them all the credit in the world. They're excellent.
Are you sure that's not the toughest test between the three teams?
It is. Oh, I would definitely say it is. My point is just they've had one test.
Sure. But you can't knock them for beating a top four team on the road by 5.
No. It was a really good performance. They're great. They're the third best team in the country. I don't really have any debate about that. I just need to go see them be more convincing for me to feel like they're on the same level as Baylor and Gonzaga. Now, whether they can beat those two teams is a different question.
Mm.
I would say they can. I don't think this is a foregone conclusion that those two teams are going to waltz to the title game against each other. But that was the other takeaway I had here. We can get into more of the specifics, but it was impressive. They both played really well. They're both elite teams. I just wasn't blown away by Michigan to the point where I change how I feel about them. I still feel there's a gap between those two teams and everybody else, and Michigan's right at the top of that list.
I'm not sure you're giving Michigan enough credit for what they just did. Like, not even close.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel
Ohio
more
State just scored
it.
87 points in Columbus while shooting 53% from the field, 50% from the 3-point line, 92% from the free throw line. EJ Liddell and Dwayne Washington combined for 53 points. Oh, but Michigan still went and won the game and scored 92 points as a team that is coined as a defense team first, even if their percentages and KenPom numbers suggest that they're a better offensive team than they are defensive team. I'm not sure what else you wanted Michigan to do here
Nothing in this game. I want them to play more really, really good Big Ten teams. That's all.
Okay. Well, nothing. So right. So they could have won this game by 100, and you still would have said, by that logic, that they're not on the same level as Gonzaga and Baylor.
If they had won by 15 and controlled it, I would feel differently.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think anybody could have won by 15 and controlled it with what Ohio State did on their home court.
I'm not even really disagreeing with you. To be clear, I don't think Michigan is on the same level as Gonzaga and Baylor either. I think it's way closer than I thought it was, though.
Yes,
for both of these teams. Both of these teams, actually, not just Michigan. But when I look, right, if you gave me Ohio State's numbers without context as to what Michigan did, I would have bet all my money on Ohio State winning the basketball game. If you told me what they shot from the floor and that they scored 87 points at home, no way in my mind that I would have found it very hard to believe that Michigan won this basketball game. But that's what Michigan did, and that was where I came away from. What I came away with after this game was I wasn't convinced Michigan could do this, could win a game on the road against an offense this good in this fashion. They had to score 92 points to win. I wasn't sure that this team could score 92 points against a team as good as Ohio State, and that's exactly what they did, and they did it in incredibly balanced fashion, right? Michigan got to 92, Ohio State got to 87, but they could not have taken more different roads to get there. Michigan had 5 different guys in double figures, 6 different guys who had 9 or more points. And apart from Dwayne Washington, EJ Liddell, and CJ Walker, nobody else on Ohio State's team had more than 6 points, and only 2 other guys had multiple field goals. So we can talk about whether or not, right, if Ohio State gets anything else from their peripheral scorers, whether it's Justin Suing or Justin Ahrens, whoever it might be, then they probably win this game. But I was, if looking at sort of deeper into the box score and rewatching parts of this game, if Ohio State was as effective as they ended up being on the offensive end, I wouldn't have expected Michigan to win this game on the road, and that's what that's what they did. And when we get to the NCAA tournament, I want a team that can beat a team 62-58 on a certain day, but also go and beat a team 92-87. And Michigan has wins by those exact scores this season, and seeing them do that, to your point initially, Josh, about them being able to beat Gonzaga, if you put up 92 points, because I think the defenses are comparable when it comes to, neither team, right? Gonzaga's defense is better than Ohio State's, and they have the size to deal with Hunter Dickinson in the way that Ohio State doesn't. But it's not unrealistic to expect a game against Gonzaga to just be a scoring fest, because they're not going to hang their hat on the defensive end. And Michigan proved that in a game of that type that they can keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the bigger takeaways for me as well, is that they can do this in multiple ways. And that's sort of the thing, that one of the things that I loved about Michigan going into this game, just sort of where I stood on them already. And then it was sort of amplified. It's like, well, now I already believed they could win in a lot of different ways with a lot of different guys. Now I see, like you said, Josh, that they can keep up offensively too against these great teams. You go into halftime and it's Michigan. It was Michigan shooting 10 of 13 from beyond the arc at halftime. Unsustainable, 77%. You knew that was going to come back down to earth. So what I was looking for in the second half, heading into the second half, was, could Michigan's defense disrupt Ohio State enough? And the answer was no, not really. It did. Ohio State was just that good offensively. They shot nearly 54% in the second half. And if you would have told me that as well, right? If you had told me, Michigan, this is a close game at halftime, very good game at halftime, but Michigan's 10 of 13 from beyond the arc, and Ohio State's about to go out there and shoot 54% in the second half, I'd say, okay, well, yeah, it was nice, good game, but Ohio State as well, and then that's where the X factor in this particular game came in, which is the difference between these two teams. Honestly, it's an oversimplification, but in this game in particular, it was Hunter Dickinson and a couple of mistakes from the Buckeyes.
Yep.
I mean, I feel bad for anybody trying to slow down Hunter Dickinson. It's next to an impossible task unless
Especially
you are
when
specific.
You're 4 inches shorter
Right,
than he is.
Right. Unless you're a team with one of these star centers that they're actually going to be playing in the next week or so. There's very few players in college basketball that are going to have a very good fighting chance to slow him down. And some credit to Ohio State. They did kind of slow him down. He didn't really get much going in the first half, but at the end of the day, of course, he gets going in the second half. He's so good on the offensive glass. When you combine what he did, I mean, the 16 second half points and just how dynamic he can be, along with, a couple of mistakes from Ohio State, nothing horrific, but, at that point it becomes these are two excellent teams. It's going to be small margins. And in this case, it's Dickinson and a couple of mistakes that, on plays that could have allowed them to get back in it, or not get back in it, but close the gap or take a lead. So yeah, for me, I mean, I think it's true, of course, that there's nothing that Michigan could really have done that would have made you look at their resume and say, right, because of the games that they've played. But the team that I saw out there, I'm not trying to put them on. I mean, I'm not thinking they belong in that same level as Gonzaga and Baylor either. I'm not trying to, jump to any huge conclusions. But for me, I think it might be time we consider them. And look, it's all semantics for how you consider it. But in my head, I'm starting to consider it as tier 1 A, B was Gonzaga, Baylor. I'm starting to think it might be tier 1 A, B, and C. And then tier 2 that has Ohio State and maybe in Illinois. That those tiers don't have to, of course, be, teams aren't completely equal, but maybe you put tier 1 A, B, and C, and then you have Ohio State and Illinois and whoever else you might want to consider in that next tier. I'm starting to think they belong there, but again, it's just a matter of how you want to judge it or measure it. We're going to get some really interesting tests for this team coming up this week, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about this here in a second, but against Iowa and against Illinois, and they have those in 2 of their next 3 games. So that's going to be real matchups to see exactly how Hunter Dickinson fares against Luka Garza and Kofi Cockburn.
Yeah, there's just, look, they're great. Both these teams are phenomenal. I just want to see Michigan do it against a team that actually has a Cockburn, a Garza. And the other part of this for me is exactly what you just said, Chris. Michigan executed better down the stretch. There were a couple bad mistakes from Ohio State that really turned this game from a 1 or 2 possession game that could go either way to a game where Ohio State was trying to stay within striking distance by hitting a couple late threes and fouling. Those couple, we haven't gotten a game from Baylor or Gonzaga. Now, neither of them have played a team as good as Ohio State. That's a very valid point. Definitely conceding.
Or on the road.
Right. You can flip this so many different ways. But we have not, whether it was Gonzaga's non-conference or what Baylor's done in the Big 12, we haven't gotten a game from them where it's a possession or 2 at the very, very end. Baylor's had some shakier 30 minutes, but the last 8 minutes of the game, they're imposing their will. So I want to see a little bit more from Michigan, but the flip side to this is if Michigan goes through here and ends up winning the Big Ten with 1 conference loss, there is no flaw to point to. I'm 100% there, where I want to see I believe they can do this now. I'm not convinced that they will. I'm not convinced Baylor would either, to be fair. Or, the Big Ten is just that much better. If they come out of this thing with 1 off day after they had and then they get this 23-day pause and they come out and they beat Wisconsin and then Rutgers and then at Ohio State and then Illinois and Iowa, there's nothing left to say. I'm just somewhat skeptical that they're going to finish this thing out, but they deserve the benefit of the doubt at this point. I absolutely concede that.
I honestly don't understand why you're skeptical, other than the fact that it hasn't happened yet. You're you're criticizing Michigan for something they haven't gotten to do yet. That's what you're doing right now, which is not fair to Michigan.
It's probably not.
And they've already beat 3 tournament quality teams after coming off a 23-day stretch. I mean, sure, they don't have the resume yet, but that's the only thing they don't have.
Right. Oh,
from the eye test. And
I would like to see what it would look like if Baylor's trio of guards played Ohio State. Because part of me thinks there's nothing Michigan could have done defensively. There's a little part of me that wonders if Baylor is a little bit better defensively. I don't know. And it's unfair to Michigan, too.
And I would also argue that, sure, go let Dwayne Washington and EJ Liddell score 53. If you hold everybody else to what you held them to, then that's a fine enough. I mean, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that they couldn't guard EJ Liddell, and Dwayne Washington was just having a day. So don't let Justin Aarons knock down 2 threes somewhere else on the floor, right? And they didn't. He had 0 points and only played 15 minutes and was not a factor. Like I said, I don't think either of these teams are as good as Gonzaga and Baylor, but I also know what I saw yesterday, and and until they don't do it, I don't have any reason to believe they can't.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the benefit of the doubt that they've earned. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just saw too many people taking one. I guess I have an issue with taking one game, as good of a performance as it was, and saying that takes them from this team that we thought was the 3rd best team in the country, but not really on the same level, to deciding they're in that conversation. There's a middle ground, which is where I think all 3 of us are.
Sure.
That they're not quite there, but I like the way you put it, Chris, about we might need to put a 1C on here, that it's not out of the realm of possibility that they are the better team on a floor with Baylor or maybe Gonzaga if things go right and they play well. Whereas I sort of had to feel like before this game, they needed some help, and Baylor would have had to do something that you could point to as, well, that's why they lost, and sort of gave Michigan an opportunity to win. Now I feel like there's a world in which Michigan just shoots the 3 well, catches a break here or there, and just is the better team. And I wasn't sure that was possible. That's where my mind has been changed. I'm not going all the way to the other end and saying they are every bit as good as Baylor based on one game, even though they now have the best win of any team in the country. Well, maybe, I mean, actually, technically it's Minnesota because they beat Michigan. But other than that.
I think I'm now to the point where if Baylor and Michigan both play good games, that Michigan can win that game. If Baylor plays a great game, then Baylor's the second best team in the country.
That's all I'm trying to say.
But it is now, we're now in a space where Michigan doesn't have to play a perfect game to beat Baylor in my mind. Maybe Gonzaga, or a combination of a good game for Michigan and just Gonzaga can't hit the broadside of a barn. But I think where I'm officially at is, if you ask me to fill out a bracket for the NCAA tournament tomorrow, Gonzaga and Baylor are still in the national championship game, and I don't have to think especially hard about that. But I also don't have to think especially hard about who's joining them in the Final Four, and that's Michigan and Ohio State until because I would assume he doesn't play well, Illinois still loses, but he's been the best player in the country for the last couple weeks, and that's why we've changed our thoughts on Illinois again. Iowa, and Iowa, I don't know, I still have the same feelings about Iowa that I've had for the last 6 months or whatever, but I'm pretty confident in what my Final Four is going to look like in a bracket prediction, unless there's just a horrible matchup or something, right? But in a vacuum, I'm pretty convinced in these 4 teams being the teams that I will pick to go to the Final Four, and what happened on Sunday just reinforced that more than anything else. That after these 2 supposedly top 4 teams played, I'm still convinced that both of them
Yep.
are top 4 teams, which is what I also wanted to be able to say here on a Monday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. That is what you want to. That is what you want to say, and I feel like so many times we haven't been able to. Not that we've had this exact matchup, but so many times we've been unable. We've had two great teams playing each other. You know, two top 10 teams or whatever, two top 25 teams, and you want to be able to say, okay, these are still teams that I'm not necessarily bumping down because of it. And it seems like there's always been some reason to move one team or another. You know, with Ohio State, I mean,
And
it
also,
was
I'm
really
going to throw hands if either of these teams are not top 4 in the country when the AP poll comes out in 2 hours.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, I think Illinois was 4th in the most recent AP poll. Is that correct?
Fifth.
I'm sorry, 5th in the most
Yeah,
recent AP
yeah.
poll. So,
Mm.
I mean,
just
I
makes it
sure
stay the
hope that
same.
they don't switch up the top 4. I mean,
No.
I hate AP
Yeah.
voters with a passion because of their desire to knock teams for just losing, regardless of who they actually lost to.
Mhm.
It shouldn't change. It might change because it's AP voters, but it shouldn't. Anyway, sorry to cut you off, Chris.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I think with Ohio State is, yeah, I don't feel any differently. I'm not ready to. I'm still. They're still clearly ahead of, Illinois and whatever other teams you want to list after that. They're clearly that number 4, like you said. That shouldn't change. All it kind of showed me was against the very, very best teams, they need to find a way to have a balanced scoring attack, a more balanced scoring attack.
Sure.
Which
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's easier said than. I mean, when you have your 2 stars do what they did, you're going to win 99.5% of the games you played. But just, thinking sort of way ahead to matchups against, the very, very best teams, your top 3 teams, and maybe one other team or two that you might throw in there based on matchup. At some point, right. We know Michigan's one of their huge strengths is their balance and their ability to win so many ways. Ohio State, obviously, they can have a balanced scoring attack as well. We've seen it this season, but if it goes away and they're really limited to just 2 guys, that's probably going to win you nearly every game. But against the very top teams,
Sure.
that could be the thing that the difference, the slight difference between top
Sure.
teams.
Sure.
And the other interesting part of this is, yeah, Ohio State couldn't guard Hunter Dickinson, but Hunter Dickinson also couldn't guard EJ Liddell.
Which was expected.
Right. And
Sure.
Yeah.
I continue to contend that EJ Liddell is the best offensive player in either of these teams. But from Ohio State's standpoint moving forward, if you're facing a Baylor or a Gonzaga where they can put a Chama Chachua, a Flo Thamba, a Mark Vital, or a Corey Kispert, for example, not Drew Timme,
Mhm.
on EJ Liddell as your second, your power forward, who's a real power forward, as opposed to Michigan, who kind of puts out. Now, Franz Wagner is massive. I think he's 6'10".
He's huge. Yeah, I had that. There was a free throw like where they had the camera that's sort of like behind the backboard, so you can see the guy shooting the free throw, but the guy's standing behind him, and it might have been a technical or it was just late in the game. So Wagner and Dickinson were standing next to each other, and I was like, okay, I knew Dickinson was that big, but man, this other guy, and they're standing next to Mike Smith, who is awesome, by the way. But Mike Smith is also like 5'11", so just the juxtaposition was laugh out loud funny. But yeah, he's huge, but also, to your point, not a guy you would put on EJ Liddell.
Right. So they went with Dickinson to do that, where Baylor wouldn't or Gonzaga wouldn't have to do that. They have a second guy who's more in the ballpark of Liddell size-wise, or Mark Vital, who's just the college basketball version of Draymond Green, great at defending guys who are 4 inches taller than he is.
4 feet, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Inches, not feet. That part of it is interesting to me because that's, to your point, Chris, that's where you could have an issue. Is there are other teams who are built a little bit better in terms of, or maybe Michigan looks, if they play again the Big Ten Tournament Championship game, maybe Juwan Howard looks at this and says, we need to change what we're going to try and do here. We're putting Dickinson on Kyle Young, and Franz Wagner's going to get his shot because Wagner's a good defender. His shot at EJ Liddell. And then they ultimately, instead of trying to do something different, the different was they went to zone and just stopped trying to play man.
And that's what I was going to say, is that I like the idea of trying to play zone. I mean, Right. Ohio State they're not as good of a 3-point shooting team as they
Oh, not even close.
showed
No.
on Sunday. I mean,
Michigan
right,
is a markedly better shooting team.
right, and so my point being is that on any given day, if you're just playing the numbers,
Yep.
the bet is to make them shoot more threes than to let EJ
Yep.
Liddell just score on you over and over
Right.
again.
Right.
So I was going to bring that up at some point here as well, is that I really liked the times that Michigan did go to zone just to get a little bit more congestion in the lane there. Now, when Dwayne Washington is playing the way that he is and shooting you out of the zone essentially, and CJ Walker had a really nice game from deep as well, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but most days I think you're going to have a better time with that.
And they were playing matchups, so it wasn't even. I mean, so
Right, it was a
Dickinson was still
matchup.
getting pulled out.
Right.
But yeah, so that was interesting to me. But that was Michigan's answer. I would just be curious what
Sure.
Baylor Gonzaga's answer is, because I think they're better suited to guard Ohio State.
Sure.
They're also better suited to guard Michigan because they have guys who are tall.
Sure.
So that's part of it too. Is right. If you get somebody who can actually bother EJ Liddell, does Ohio State have enough to overcome that?
The last thing I'll say is that if I had to pick a way for Ohio State to lose, if I had to pick a way for the offense to go for Ohio State, it would be of the not ideal scenarios. It would be this one. I would rather have my two best players step
Sure.
up in a massive way, and hope next time around that we get some shots from whether it's Justice Suing or Justin Aarons or someone else to knock down a couple more shots. Watching those guys step up the way that they did I would rather see that than the other way around, just because I think that's more encouraging to look at and be like, okay, our guys, our best guys, they could get it done against Michigan. We just need a couple more shots to go around the peripherals, and we should be in good shape. That's
And
the
make
much
better
more
decisions down the stretch.
right, and not make behind the back passes to guys that aren't looking, and that wasn't late in the game. But also you can't have that happen in a game that is as close as it is. Of course, talking about Justice Suing's behind the back pass to Isaiah Livers that then turned into an and one. But right, of course, those mistakes are part of it as well. But you probably need more than 11 points from your starters, not named Dwayne Washington and EJ Liddell. Anything else in this game?
I don't think so.
The other thing I'll say real quick, the other problem Ohio State had is that Michigan's bench was better.
It
Or
was.
at least it was comparable. Because Sean D. Brown went out there and basically canceled out CJ Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And Zed Key didn't have a great game. That's a problem for Ohio State. Those two guys coming off the bench need to be difference makers. Now, CJ Walker definitely was. But you can't have Sean D. Brown and Austin Davis coming out there and doing a comparable job, because that means your five have got to be better than Michigan's five. And they don't have a Mike Smith in the starting lineup. And they don't have a Hunter Dickinson in the starting lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, they have an EJ Liddell and a Dwayne Washington, but I want Michigan starting five all day long. Part of the reason I like this Ohio State team so much is the options you have off the bench. And when you don't get anything from Justin Aarons, and you have one guy that's good off the bench and Sean D. Brown does the same thing for Michigan, it puts that much more pressure on you and makes your margin of error that much smaller.
There's a small part of me that doesn't want to knock them too much, because Washington and Liddell did take 33 shots, that's not a knock. That's just when there's a lot of water in the well, keep going to it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because Dwayne Washington I'm assuming is not taking, he's taking 12 shots a game. So, but he's not taking 18. So
No, that was the best game of his career.
right. The point I'm just making is that they're on most nights gonna make, because Seth Towns made one of the two shots he took, and Zed Key made one of the three shots he took, and Amici Johnson made the only shot he took. Right. 3 minutes of not a big footprint on the game, but the point is still, it's not like they all went 1 of 6.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So now, of course, on the other hand, you want a little bit more balance, maybe, but when your two best players are playing the way that they were, Zed Key, you're just not going to get your 6 shots per game like you usually do, which is fine, but just the nature of the situation. We're going to talk more college basketball here in a moment. We'll take a quick break, come back to some more college basketball from the weekend, winners and losers. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.